Okay, so in this video, we're going to be looking at objection handling using a combination of Jeremy Miner's NEPQ with some techniques we can pull from cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, if you've been studying Jeremy at all, you're well aware that he is pulling directly from psychotherapeutic techniques, behavioral science, as well as neuroscience. And in this video, we're going to bring in some techniques offered by cognitive behavioral therapy to move a client from inaction to action in a way that's collaborative and respects their process. Why Jeremy Miner's approach works so well is that he is not fighting against the client's resistance, he is working with the client's resistance. And in this video, we're just going to add a couple more tools for you to use for when the classic frame, deframe, reframe sequence that Jeremy offers might not be enough, right? So let's just imagine you get the objection, I want to think about it. Okay, so the way to respond to that, of course, is to agree, right? We validate their frame, their viewpoint, their pattern responses. I want to think about that. If we resist that, defenses go up and the sale goes away. If we validate that and acknowledge that, it softens resistance, right? So of course you want to think about that. This is a big decision. You know, it's really important that you feel good about what you're doing here today. And I agree with you, right? So you, again, agree with the frame. Now you're going to move to a deframe, okay? And deframe in this scenario, it's we're going to use one where we're going to ask them to imagine like what it would be like. So you'd say something, imagine like, as you're thinking about this, let's just imagine that everything checks out. The coverage amount is perfect. It makes sure that your kids aren't scrambling when that day comes. The monthly payment is well within your budget, and the start date works. You know, if this were the case, is this something that you would even want to have, right? That question is a pattern interrupt. They're now moving from their stuck, patterned, I want to think about it, into an inquiry around what is it that I want? What is my motivation, right? When they answer that question, let's say you get a yes. You want to be quick, interject, as Jeremy would say, because usually it's going to be followed by a but. So yes. And before they can say but, you say, great, tell me what it is that you like about this policy, or what do you like about, you know, putting something like this in place today? And listen, right? Because this is now the reframe. They're going to tell you what they like about the policy, the benefit of moving forward, what it does for them and their family. So that's really important. You want to listen and then reflect back what you're hearing. It's called active listening, of course. So you, okay, got it. So you really like the idea that your daughter would be covered, and you like going to bed tonight knowing that you've done your job as a father. Is that about right? Yes, great. So that's the reframe. Now, if it feels solid enough at that point, if you feel like the client is saying, you know what, this is the right move, of course, by all means, going for the application. But as we all know, the first pass at an objection oftentimes doesn't yield in the client moving towards the application. We have more work to do, I think. And this is where CBT comes in. So let's now use a technique called reality testing, okay? Reality testing is going to allow us to go back to the original frame. And we're, in this case, going to test the assumptions underneath, I want to think about it. So when a client says, I want to think about it, they believe that there is more risk in putting this policy in place than there is in putting it off. And they're making several assumptions here. One, that the price being offered is going to be there tomorrow or next month or next year. Two, that they're not going to pass between now and when they put some coverage in place. And three, their family's going to be okay in the end. It's like not that big of a deal. They're just not present to what's actually here and what's actually underneath that statement, I want to think about it. So now we want a reality test with a question. Again, that doesn't invalidate that frame. Again, so while you're thinking about it, right? While you're thinking about it, have you thought about what would happen if a new prescription comes online or a diagnosis which doubles the premium or makes you ineligible for this type of coverage? Or worse, the unexpected happens and your daughter is left without protection. What would happen then? And get them to articulate that. If they tell you, you know, that would be bad for my daughter, that would be bad for me, like I never thought about that, great. You want to summarize that, reflect that back to them, strengthen that. If the guy says, you know, I don't want to, you know, hey, I just want to think about it, brushes that off because he doesn't want to confront that, that's fine. You've already done your job by asking the question, because what he's resisting is the truth. The truth is that there's risk in putting it off, and you've brought that to his awareness, and he's uncomfortable now. And so at that point, you back off, say, we obviously, we don't have to go there, but we can both at least agree that there's risk in putting this off, correct? Right? So you get agreement that there's risk. So that is the reality test of the original frame. Okay, so from there, another step you can take is called decisional balancing. And it's really collaborative. You say, okay, great. So you know what? Let's look at this together. Okay, what is the risk of putting this in place versus the risk of waiting and thinking about it? Okay, and get him to articulate that. And then you'd ask other questions like, what is the risk of not putting this in place versus the risk of thinking about it? You can ask it several ways. You're really just trying to get everything on the table so that it's collaborative. You're not leaning in one direction or the other. It's actually better to kind of say like, what's the benefit of thinking about this versus the benefit of putting this in place. So you're looking at benefits, risks, kind of want to go with where he started. What's the benefit of thinking about it versus the benefit of putting this in place, or vice versa. So you're just kind of putting that all on the table so that he's got a balanced sense of what is actually going on here in this decision-making process. Again, we're just helping him to make an informed decision, right? So the next move in CBT would be then a permission shift. And really what that is we're helping the client give him or herself permission to move forward, to move out of that original patterned automatic frame of I want to think about it. I don't do business like this quickly. I've got to think about it. I'm not going to move. I'm stuck, right? They're stuck. So you're going to move into a hypothetical scenario. You're not going to ask them to move towards the application yet. It's too risky at this point. So you'd say, well, John, let's just imagine we could do both. What if we selected a smaller coverage amount, something that you knew was comfortable and affordable? At the same time, we push the start date out a week so that you can think about it. So we honor the part that wants to protect your children, do the right thing as a father, while also honoring the part that wants to think about it. How would that feel, right? And again, it's a hypothetical. And then you get them to think about that. That could work, right? At that point, can I make a suggestion? Why don't we do just that? Why don't we put this application together? We'll get it submitted. We'll get you the approval, push the start date out a week. And then if you want to make any changes before this coverage goes into place, you call me. I've got your back. We can move the coverage back up. But this way you go to bed tonight knowing you've done your job as a father and your daughter's protected. Does that sound fair? And then boom, you're into the application. Okay, so again, just looking at the classic NEPQ, frame, deframe, reframe, but we're adding a few more distinctions here, right? We're adding the reality test of the assumptions underneath the initial frame. We're doing a little decisional balancing, again, bringing everything onto the table so they can weigh both sides, right? And then we do a hypothetical scenario so that in their mind, they can imagine what it's like to actually move forward, right? We're not asking them to move forward at that point. The brain sees that as a little too risky. So you hypothetically have them imagine moving forward and that both parts can be honored. You get agreement there. Can I make a suggestion? You're giving them control still. You're asking them if it would be okay to make a suggestion. And then from there, you recommend moving into the application. Okay, so that's what we have today. If you like this kind of content, click like and subscribe. And don't forget to tune back in, because in the next video, we're going to be looking at Jeremy Miner's Building the Gap, and we're going to compare it to motivational interviewing, which is a psychotherapeutic technique developed in the 80s to move clients from ambivalence into action. Okay, see you in the next video.